Pinpoint Weather University, sponsored by Gaston Roofing.
Welcome into Pinpoint Weather University. I'm meteorologist Brandon Lawson here on Queen City News Plus. It's an exciting Pinpoint Weather University because if you are a fan of snow, we're going to be talking about the new winter weather outlook that was released from the Climate Prediction Center. So we now have the projections for what we might see coming up this winter season. And this is actually a look at just some of the snow we got here in the Carolinas last year. It's good to see that we did get a little bit of winter weather because it had been pretty much 3 years before we'd even seen any snow at all in the Carolinas, especially towards Charlotte. I mean, we've seen snow in the mountains, of course, but like Charlotte, we went on just an incredible snow drought. It was the longest snow drought in the Queen City history, in Charlotte's history. It was the longest we've went without snow. And this episode, normally when we talk about the winter weather outlook or winter season outlook being released by the Climate Prediction Center, normally they do a really cool press conference, a press release. They really go big with this, but unfortunately due to the government shutdown, they didn't go big with it. It was just a release. La Nina is in effect, and this is what the outlook would be. It was, kind of boring this year, but we'll break it down for you and talk a little bit about what La Nina could mean for us as we head into the winter season. We're also going to be talking about a plane windshield cracked by a mysterious object. They still haven't figured out what caused this to happen, but I think the interesting thing is that there's some speculation that it could have been a weather balloon, the weather data box that is hooked up to the balloon. We're going to talk about what that weather data box is and why it's important to weather, and plus we'll give you a fall color update. Yes, these fall colors still peaking in the mountains, and I expect some more peaking of colors as we get a little bit further east over the next week or so. We'll talk about where some of that color is going to be present. But first, we're going to start with your winter weather outlook. And I tell you what, if you're a fan of snow, it's not good news for you here in the Carolinas. La Nina conditions are favored, according to the Climate Prediction Center. That is not a good pattern for snow here in the Carolinas. That really limits snow chances here because we, A, end up in a more warmer pattern, and B, we end up with more of a drier pattern. So we get more of these inland tracts of low pressure systems. And I'll kind of show you what that looks like here in a moment. But essentially, it leads to warmer air, one thing. And then, drier air as well is definitely not a good thing you want to have when you're trying to get snow. You need moisture. It's already hard enough to get moisture around here during the winter. So knowing that we're going to be under a warmer and drier pattern is definitely not good news. That doesn't necessarily mean we're not going to see any winter precipitation at all. Doesn't mean we're not going to see snow at all this winter for December, January, and February. It doesn't mean we're not going to see ice or things like that. That is still possible, but on average, we're likely going to see below average precipitation and above average temperatures, which obviously wouldn't be a good combination for snow. So let's talk about the La Nina. What is that? Well, it's all has to do with the waters in the Eastern Pacific, the temperature of those waters. So what ends up happening in the Eastern Pacific, we've got trade winds, just winds above the ocean surface there. And essentially, when these winds are stronger, it is able to push some of the warmer water back to the west towards Asia, and that allows upwelling of cooler water to the surface there of the Eastern Pacific. So essentially, the Eastern Pacific, the ocean water, is cooler than normal. Now, you're probably wondering, well, what does that little translation have to do with us several miles away from the Eastern Pacific? Well, it changes the way the jet stream behaves. So what happens during La Nina, when you get that cooler water there, that actually allows the jet stream to shift a little bit further north. And that's definitely not a good scenario for us when it comes to snow because the jet stream is trending further north. That allows for more warmer air to settle in towards the southern U.S. So because you got to remember, looking at this full screen for you, whenever you have the jet stream further north, the Pacific, the polar jet there, that essentially is allowing the cooler air to stay north and also is not going to allow for a whole lot of activity because we get a lot of frontal boundaries and areas of low pressure along the jet stream that ride the jet stream. So if that jet stream's further north, it's obviously not going to lead to good conditions. So you can see the jet stream's further north in this pattern, you get warmer than normal temperatures. And then when you look at the La Nina when it comes down to precipitation, notice where the jet stream is. You've got wetter than normal temperatures for the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, And then towards the Northwest Pacific, where you have that moisture feeding into the jet stream, you get pretty active weather, very wet during the winter season. And really, with any time we have this setup, it doesn't have to be during winter. But winter obviously is a big deal when it comes down to La Nina because it changes how much snow folks could see. And then obviously, with the jet stream being further north, that cooler air being further north, and the activity being further north down the southern U.S., we're going to have drier than normal temperatures. And this is going to change storm tracks too. We talk about storm tracks a lot during the winter season because they're so important because they change the temperature, how much moisture you can get, and all kinds of different specifics when it comes down to winter weather forecasting. So this is a look at storm track possibilities. When we talk about areas of low pressure, we've got these areas of low pressure that develop towards the Gulf, or they can develop in the Rockies, and they work their way over to the east. And here's just a scenario here. An area of low pressure developing in the Gulf and then riding up the coast. We get that low riding up the coast, kind of like your typical nor'easter here. But here's the thing. During a La Nina setup, with the jet stream being further north, the area of low pressure wants to gravitate more and ride towards the jet stream a little bit more. So that area of low pressure is actually going to be further west. And with that area of low pressure being further west, that leads to more of an inland track. An inland track leads to more rainfall here. When you zoom in a little bit closer, you're looking at your arrows. The green arrow is a more rainfall track for us here in the Carolinas because you get a lot more warm air intrusion when the area of low pressure is further west. As you get further east with the area of low pressure, that drags in more of a northeasterly flow. So that means that we're getting cooler air from the northeast to come in, and that allows for more snow or freezing rain, or sometimes you can get a mixture of the freezing rain and the precipitation types, because not only do you have to worry about the air at the lower levels, but you also have to worry about the air towards the mid levels as well, because that can change what type of precipitation we see. So yeah, storm track possibilities, a more inland track definitely leads to more precipitation when it comes down to rainfall. And then a further off the coast track allows for cooler air to come in, and that will lead to a little bit more snow or maybe even freezing rain. So let's talk about what the Climate Prediction Center has come up with. And it's not much of a difference compared to what we just talked about. The Climate Prediction Center has warmer than normal temperatures across the southern U.S., and then probably around average temperatures for the Ohio Valley and parts of the northern Rockies. And then as you get further to the north, really up towards the Dakotas, the upper Midwest, the Northwest Pacific, that's when we're looking at a little bit more cooler than average temperatures. So a little bit more cooler air there. But you can see there's pretty decently high confidence that we're going to see likely some warmer than normal temperatures for the winter season, especially as you get down towards Florida and the deep south and along the Gulf Coast. That's where we're really going to be seeing, it looks like, some very warm air this winter. And then also towards Albuquerque as you're getting towards Phoenix and these areas. So yeah, I mean, this is pretty good warmth the further south you go, and that makes sense for a La Nina because the polar jet stream is staying further north, and the polar jet stream is not bringing that polar air further south, and it's allowing for more warmer air. Now, again, when you look at this outlook, I'm going to show you the Carolinas again. This doesn't mean we're going to see warmer air all winter long. It doesn't mean that we're never going to be 32 degrees or we're never going to see a 20-degree night. It just means when we sum up the temperatures for December, February, or January and February, this just means that we're going to be seeing a little bit more higher average temperatures at the end of the day. When we sum up winter, we will likely have an above average winter when it comes down to temperatures. And same thing goes for the precipitation. Let's look at the precipitation outlook. You look further north towards the Dakotas, the Midwest, the upper Midwest, we've got above normal precipitation. Now, further south, we're looking at drier drier conditions, likely going to see below normal precipitation. Now, you can really see that over the southeast, parts of the mid-Atlantic, including our area. And then also as you're getting towards Texas, and those areas that we're talking about, essentially everywhere where we're expecting warmer air across the southern U.S., we're going to be expecting likely below normal precipitation. But notice where the bullseye is for more wet weather, the Ohio Valley, literally just right over the Ohio Valley, up into the upper Midwest, and then especially towards the Northwest Pacific and over towards the Billings area, also towards the Dakotas as well. So Again, this pretty much just goes along with what we were talking about when it comes down to that La Nina pattern. So what can we expect with the La Nina pattern taking shape here for the 2025-2026 winter outlook? La Nina conditions are favorable. Again, that is the prediction from the Climate Prediction Center and other folks as well there. They do a lot of studying and calculating and trying to figure out just how much a La Nina. And La Nina could be very strong, it could be very weak. This is looking more so towards the weaker side, meaning some of those impacts might not be quite as strong. But still, it's just important to mention a La Nina does not give us a good pattern for winter weather here in the Carolinas. It usually leads to a warmer and drier pattern here in the Carolinas. So that's something we'll be looking at. I'm not saying we're not going to see snow at all. We did last year, maybe like I think a half an inch or so. And it was the first time in over 3 years since we've seen it. I know you couldn't really go out with the kids and you couldn't go out yourself and really enjoy it because it wasn't much. Most of it was covered in ice when we did see the snow earlier this year. But it happened. That's the only thing we can be thankful for last winter is that we did see at least something. So coming up in the nuts block before we go to break here. Before I go to break, I do want to mention again, keep your hopes up if you're a snow lover. I do think there's a chance we could get a little bit of snow this year. We just got to have the right low pressure track and also the right track of the jet stream so we can get that jet stream further south at some point this year. Coming up in just a little bit on the other side of the break, a plane windshield cracked by a mysterious object. They still don't know what object it was. We're going to discuss that coming up on the other side of the break. And the reason we're putting this on Pinpoint Weather University is because a weather instrument could be to blame. That's on the other side of the break here on Pinpoint Weather University. You're watching on Queen City News Plus. Shout out to our YouTube viewers as well. Welcome back into Pinpoint Weather University. This is a look at a plane windshield that was cracked by a mysterious object. Still an investigation trying to figure out what caused the cracked windshield, but this was an Air Canada Boeing flight 787-8. The flight was set to fly from London to Toronto, but instead it had to land in Dublin because of this kind of wild incident here with that windshield being cracked. Now, there's still an investigation trying to figure out what caused this. They've been doing a lot of data tracking, looking at the weather patterns during that time, and just trying to figure out what could have caused it. There's all kinds of different just ideas of what may have happened. Space junk was really one of the top ones, which I'm not shocked about that. A lot of folks get really excited about space junk and things like that. But yeah, this is scary. I mean, this, you're imagine being on this flight and the windshield's cracked. Now, I'm not sure exactly if folks that were on the flight knew it was cracked or maybe the pilot told them, but obviously they knew they had to make an emergency landing for repairs. So yeah, it was repaired and it flew back to Canada after the repairs in Dublin. So obviously it didn't damage the flight enough to where they didn't feel like they could get it back up, and it doesn't say if anybody was on board. Probably just flew back by itself with maybe a pilot or whatnot just to get it back to Canada and get a review of this. So anyway, I know it's Pinpoint Weather University. Why are we talking about a cracked windshield on a flight? The reason why is because some folks are saying it could have been a weather balloon. So let's talk about what a weather balloon is. So weather balloon, first off, it carries a weather data box. They're saying the weather data box on the weather balloons could have caused this. Not saying it did, but it was being investigated as a possibility. So that weather data box is called a radiosonde. And essentially, it's got just a small little weather box that is attached to the balloon itself. And this radiosonde is collecting data as it goes up in the atmosphere. It's collecting temperature, dew point data. It's collecting wind data, how the winds are changing, what height, how much wind shear is there. So there's several different things that a radiosonde does as it's going up into the atmosphere. It's essentially a rising radio station, or excuse me, not radio, weather station in the atmosphere. As the radiosonde and the weather balloons going up, this is essentially a weather station that's going up in the air and just giving us an idea of what's happening in the upper levels. And it's very important because what happens in the upper levels dictates a lot of what happens down at the lower levels, essentially everything. The upper level pattern is extremely important. We talked about how the jet stream changes our weather patterns in the winter due to La Nina. The upper level weather pattern is essential to weather. This is why radiosonde and weather balloons are extremely important. So more on the weather balloons. Why are they important? Well, they're launched twice a day. They're launched once in the morning and once during the evening. They're launched from several different National Weather Service sites and other private sites as well. I believe it's like 76,000 weather balloons that are launched throughout the entire year. Man, it's a lot of balloons. And this examines the vertical profile of the atmosphere. So again, it's helping us analyze what the temperature data is like from the surface to the upper levels, what the dew points are like from the surface to the upper levels. Also, how are the winds changing with height? Are the winds changing direction? Are the winds changing speed? Because that is another thing that changes just how our weather could behave. If there's a big change in wind speed with height, it just means that there could be a greater chance for tornadoes, depending on what the weather setup is. If we have a cold front moving in, or the wind's veering with height, meaning the different direction. So there's all kinds of different things we look at, and it's extremely important to weather forecasting. Again, if we did not have weather balloons, weather models would struggle. They use weather balloons to figure out what's currently going on in the atmosphere now. If they didn't have that base to go off of, they would be in trouble. It's almost like the weather model's cheat sheet for maybe a test. Like, let's say you're doing a test and you get a cheat sheet and you're able to kind of study it and the study guide, and the test is kind of the same as the study guide. You get in there, you're like, oh my gosh, the answers are exactly the same as what I just studied. Well, this is essentially what the weather models are doing. They're pretty much studying the atmosphere, what's happening now, and that helps them determine what will actually happen in the future on the test. Per se. I know it's kind of a weird example, but just a way to kind of help understand how the weather models work. Obviously, weather models are using data from airplanes. They use data from the National Hurricane Center when they go out and they fly. They will drop these radiosondes down into hurricanes as well to get an idea of how the atmosphere is behaving there too. So it's a really important thing. They'll do special balloon launches during severe weather events or before severe weather events to figure out how the not only the models are handling, but to figure out how the atmosphere is handling things as well. So they're pretty important to forecasting. So what does it look like? This is what the data looks like. I'm gonna go ahead and take this on full screen for you so you can see it. So at the end of the day, when the weather balloon is launched and it gets all its data and everything's collected, this is what the data looks like. So that red line on the left, that is your temperature profile. That is how the temperature is changing with height. Your green line on the left of that red line is dew points. That is what your dew point is with the change in height as you're going up into the upper levels. Now, a little tidbit. I'm not going to get too much into this because this is extremely nerdy stuff. But I mean, we're getting all kinds of different stuff. This is actually a weather balloon launch from Greensboro. So Raleigh's launches their weather balloons from Greensboro. Just kind of fill that hole a little bit, fill that gap. And essentially, this balloon launch here is from Tuesday evening, October 20th, when we had high pressure in control. There was barely a cloud in the sky. And you can see how far the red line and the green line are from one another. The further apart they are, the more drier air there is. So essentially, if there's a lot of dry air in the atmosphere, including the upper levels, the mid levels, you're not going to have enough moisture to create cloud cover. And that's why you didn't see a whole lot of clouds on Tuesday, October 20th, when we had high pressure in control and a lot of dry air. And on the right, if you see those barbs there on the right, those are actually wind. That's the wind profile. So that's showing you how strong the winds are in knots. So you see like those little dashes. Like, let's see if I can kind of point it out here. Right in here, I'm putting my mouse on it. Here's the wind. You see the wind profiles. So essentially, these bars kind of stick out, and that's telling you what direction the wind's coming from. So the wind's coming from the west here in this example. You can kind of see it here. The wind's coming from the west and the upper levels there. And if you see like these little lines, so you've got your little stick that's sticking out, and then you kind of have the little lines that are sticking out from the stick itself. It almost looks like a flag. But those little lines that are sticking out from the actual wind direction is wind speed. So these, 1 is 10 knots, 20 knots, 30 knots. If you see like a little flag, like a triangle, I believe that's 50 knots. So again, that is just giving us the wind profile with height. This right here, this kind of helps us. It's called a hodograph. We'll use it a lot when it comes down to tracking tornadoes, but essentially if you have like a big hook, it could be a sign of maybe So a lot of wind shear in the atmosphere, some good ingredients for tornadoes, and there's all kinds of other different stuff here. We talk about CAPE a lot. CAPE is, it's basically convective inhibition. They're trying to figure out how much, I should say, instability there is in the atmosphere. So you've got CAPE here, SYN, inhibition, which is basically where you're not getting a whole lot of instability. There's all kinds of different things. I don't want to get too much in level of free convection when we start seeing rising in the atmosphere, lifted condensation level. So there's, yeah, I'm just kind of nerding out here looking at this chart, but I mean, it's just really cool. I mean, this is essentially the base of our weather forecast for the day, looking at the weather sounding, figuring out what's happening. I'm like shaking, getting all excited about this, but essentially this is the weather sounding. This is the data that we're getting. Not only looking at the surface where we tell you it's 78 degrees right now, we can tell you if it's 30 degrees at 10,000 feet or 0 degrees at 1,000 feet, just all kinds of different things. So this is a big part of our weather forecast and how things work. So I did think that was important to mention. Anytime the weather can get blamed for maybe a cracked windshield, it's important to get it in there, right? So anyway, we are going to talk on the other side of the break about the fall colors. So obviously the fall colors are really peaking in the mountains. Here's video of that right here. A lot of folks have been getting out and enjoying these fall colors, getting out early, getting some photography of it, and also trying to make sure that we catch the scenic views with our eyes as well. I always mention cameras don't do us justice when it comes down to fall colors. So we're going to talk about where some of those fall colors will be peaking here over the next couple of weeks. That's on the other side of the break here on Pinpoint Weather University. Welcome back into Pinpoint Weather University. I'm meteorologist Brandon Lawson. Obviously, the fall colors are really popping across the mountains. I hope everybody has gotten an opportunity to at least view the colors so far up there. Last year, different story. We still have the fall colors, but on the ground, things were different, right? We just had Helene and the Western North Carolinas were just trying to pick up the pieces. A lot of businesses were closed, but they have said over and over again, and the Western Carolinas are open for business. And it's not only the beautiful leaves that we see here that are awesome in the Western Carolinas, it is some of the small businesses there. I was there for a wedding a couple weeks ago, and the wedding actually had like an ice cream vendor, and they couldn't be more nicer, chatting with me and just talking about how much more business they've had so far this fall compared to other falls. So I just love that stuff. It's just great stories because you just know these people have been through a lot over there. So if you haven't gotten a chance to go, and you're just like, man, I really don't want to take the trip. It's a long trip. It is worth it. Your eyes are going to see beautiful colors and beautiful people out there in the Western Carolinas. And I will say, you still have some time. I know that we're getting a little past peak in some locations. Let's take this full for you. But this is a look at the peak colors we're going to be seeing in the mountains through at least Sunday, October 26th. I do think we'll start getting past peak after that, but there'll still be some good color there. We'll start to get a little bit more dull as we go into the week of October 27th. But notice, though, still across the mountains, great color. Now, you see where there's a little bit more of a darker shade here? These are just highest elevations along the Blue Ridge Parkway. So the ridge lines, the ridge tops, they're past peak, especially as you're getting really high up in the atmosphere. Those areas are definitely past peak for sure. But I do think some of the more mountain areas are going to be below peak, or still going to be at peak, which is really good. You can see next week, still probably some good peak color there across much of the Western Carolinas. But as you get further east, that is where we got more high color towards Lenoir, Statesville, spots like that. So we are going to start to see the colors fill in a little bit more. But even next week, I mean, I would say through at least early November, we're still going to have great color in the mountains. At least the peak color fills in even more. And the thing is that we're going to start seeing that wave effect, which is really good news. That wave effect is really going to fill in across the Western Carolinas. So, how you have your mountain slope next week, you're really going to be seeing the peak color go all the way down the mountain slope, which could be very beautiful if that's something you're into, maybe late October into early November. That's going to do it for this edition of Pinpoint Weather University. Gosh, I love talking to you guys on this episode. Every Wednesday, we drop a new episode on Queen City News Plus. Download the app. It's on Roku. Easy app to access. And our YouTube viewers as well. Thank you so much for your attention. And we'll continue to pump out the education for you guys. We're getting closer to winter, and the tropics are ending as well when it comes down to hurricane season within the next month. We'll be detailing a lot of good stuff coming up here over the next few weeks. I'm meteorologist Brandon Lawson signing off here on Queen City News Plus. Hopefully you enjoyed another episode of Pinpoint Weather University. I'll leave you a little bit of winter video as we go to break. Winter season outlook, not looking great for us, but don't get your hopes down too yet.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.